Did your family have favorites? If so, were you the favorite or someone else?
I stopped reminding my family about my birthday this year, and not because I finally matured or learned to let things go, but because I wanted to test a simple, ugly truth I had been suspecting for years, which is that if I went completely quiet and did not nudge, prompt, or make myself visible in any way, they would not only forget again, they would feel relieved, and that relief would tell me everything I needed to know about where I actually stood with them. You would think a grown woman would shrug at something like a birthday, yet the sting never fades when the same people who can plan an entire ballroom event for my sister down to the ice bucket labels somehow lose track of a single modest dinner for me. And I do mean every year, because there was always a new excuse that kept the machinery spinning: a deadline, a budget hiccup, an aunt's medical thing, a dog sitter issue, a neighbor's retirement party that somehow outranked me, and if I said anything, the replies came fast with that special family tone that says you are being dramatic and ungrateful, and why are you making trouble over something so small, which is funny considering nothing is small when it is for my sister, who is charming and loud in a way that fills a room and keeps them busy. It started when we were kids, and the pattern hardened when we were adults, and I can tell you the moment I understood the system wasn't broken by accident, but sustained because it worked for them. Since by centering her they got to feel generous and celebratory and important, and by sidelining me they got to blame my quietness for the lack of effort, as if silence is proof of not wanting anything. And they framed it like I was independent and low maintenance, which sounds like a compliment, until you realize it is a budget category. My sister, Emily, did not build this alone, and I do not paint her as a villain, yet she enjoyed the perks without asking questions, and the older we got the more she leaned into it, sending me links to her gala dresses or caterer tastings as if I should cheer from the sidelines while paying for my own dinner at home. And when my birthday landed the same week as a work event of hers, I became an afterthought she would get to next week, a phrase that sat in my phone like a parking ticket now. One intends to pay. There was one year where I decided to be direct, and I said to my mother, "I feel hurt that we are doing all this for Emily and we can't even do pizza for me," and she put on that careful voice that implies she is managing a crisis and not a daughter. And she said I was misreading things and that of course they care, and she floated vague plans that never took shape, and when the day passed and nothing happened she acted surprised, said she thought we were doing something the following weekend. And once again, I was the one who apparently misunderstood the calendar, which is a neat trick if you think about it, because it keeps the mess on my side of the fence. So I started tracking, not on paper, just in the back of my mind, every post, every group text, every receipt waved around for her. And every time I quietly bought my own cake like a grown woman who can take care of herself while the family congratulated themselves for how well Emily's theme came together, and I noticed something that changed me, which is that every year I kept hoping they would notice without me prompting them, and every year I felt myself shrink a little more when they did. And that shrinking is more dangerous than anger because it makes you accept less as normal. This year the group chat lit up months in advance for Emily's milestone, with spreadsheets and playlist drafts and a cousin pitching a photo backdrop idea, and my name popped up only when someone needed me to cover a task, like picking up signage or reformatting invitations, and I did not argue because arguing had never moved the needle, so I decided to become unhelpful in an invisible way, which is to say I simply stopped volunteering and I stopped reminding. And when my mother called to ask whether I would split the cost of an upgrade for the ballroom lighting, I said I was managing my own finances carefully and could not contribute. And the pause on the line told me she had never considered that my budget might matter if it did not serve the main event. Here is the part one have not said out loud before, even to close friends, because it feels pathetic, but it is the truth. I used to leave hints around my own birthday, like a teenager. A casual comment about a new restaurant I wanted to try or a store I had a gift card for, and every time the hint sunk without a ripple I felt childish for even trying, so this time I did nothing, not a peep, not a joke, not a calendar share. And the quiet felt like hunger at first and then like strength because when you stop begging for crumbs you realize how many calories of attention you were burning just to be seen. In that quiet, I started redirecting energy toward myself, which is a big phrase for something simple. I tightened up my savings, renegotiated a couple of bills, closed out a side project that had been sitting half done. And I made a private list of what I actually wanted in life that did not require a single person's permission, and I let myself imagine a moment that would belong to me without a fight, and I understood that if any celebration was going to happen for me, it had to be designed by me and paid for by me and revealed on my terms, not because I wanted to compete with Emily, but because I was done competing at all. So when my birthday week arrived and the family chat exploded with final ballroom details, seating charts, and a last-minute vendor drama, I made coffee, put my phone face down, and checked my email for something that mattered only to me. And when the confirmation came through and the calendar reminder clicked into place, I felt that steady, quiet surge you get when a long plan finally meets the moment, and I realized I did not need them to remember me to feel real, which is fortunate because they did not remember, not a call, not a text, not even a lazy comment, and that should have broken me, except I was already somewhere else in my head, already set on a different kind of milestone that would not ask for their applause. I did not complain, I did not hint, I did not even show up to help with last-minute decorations, and no one noticed that part either, which tells you everything. And while they were busy counting centerpieces, I was counting down to an appointment they knew nothing about, the kind of appointment that comes with keys and signatures and a grin you cannot wipe off even if you try, and if you are wondering whether I planned it that way, to land right on top of their big weekend, let me say this much. For now, I did not have to plan the timing to make a point, because the point had already been made, and the timing took care of itself, which is why, when my phone buzzed with Emily's latest rehearsal clip, I turned it face down again and looked at my calendar. And I knew that the next 24 hours were going to rewrite the whole family script whether they liked it or not. When I say I stopped arguing and started deciding, I do not mean I became cold or vindictive. I mean I redirected every ounce of energy that used to go into managing other people's expectations into managing my own future. And once I made that shift, small choices started stacking in a way that felt quiet but unstoppable, like clicking together pieces that had been sitting in a drawer for years while I kept pretending the missing parts would arrive if I kept being agreeable. I began with money because money is the part that no one can gaslight, and while the group chat debated centerpieces and playlists, I pulled every statement I had, looked at interest rates like a responsible adult instead of a tired daughter, paused my little luxuries, renegotiated a couple of subscriptions, and took on a side gig I could do at night, and it was not glamorous, and it was not a speech, but it was control, and watching my savings account move from symbolic to serious did something to my spine that years of pep talks never did. I spoke to a loan officer who did not care about family dynamics or Emily's milestone theme, or who usually organizes the dessert table, and she told me what I qualified for and what would improve my rate, and the conversation was simple and brutally fair. And I left it with a list of steps I could actually do, not steps that depended on whether anyone remembered I exist between venue walkthroughs, and over the next few weeks I did them, line by line, without announcing it like a manifesto. Because the most radical thing I could do was stay silent and consistent until my life changed in a way that could not be walked back by a guilt trip. Meanwhile, the expectations kept rolling in from home base, because even when you say you are busy, the family machine assumes you will squeeze their tasks into your schedule the way you always have. And the first test came when my mother called about splitting an upgraded lighting package that would really make the room pop, and I listened without interrupting, and when she finished I told her I could not contribute and would sit out any optional costs. And the silence that followed had a texture I recognized, that mix of shock and mild offense that says you have stepped out of character, so I stayed calm and repeated that I was managing my own commitments, and she shifted to disappointment in that soft, practiced way, telling me she just wants everyone to feel included and special, which is a fascinating word choice in a year when no one has asked me what would make me feel included or special. I started bowing out of tasks that had my name on them because I always stepped in when others were late, so when my aunt messaged asking if I could take over the slideshow, I said I was not available and suggested she ask one of the cousins who had been sending ideas all week, and the look I imagined on her face felt like a warm towel on a sore muscle, not because I wanted her to struggle, but because I could finally see the structure that had kept me busy and quiet was not sacred, it was just convenient. And when you remove your free labor from a machine built on your free labor, the gears make a noise that everyone can hear. Inside that new quiet, I made appointments, I toured a few places, I learned the language of disclosures and escrow and inspections, and I kept my mouth shut because in my family any hint of a plan becomes a committee whether you want one or not. And I was done crowdsourcing my life to people who could not remember to buy me a cupcake without prompting, and when I found a place that felt right to my gut and my spreadsheet, I made an offer without consulting a single relative, and my agent called me at work to say the seller had accepted, and I stared at the wall for a long minute with my hand over my mouth, not to be dramatic, but because the sound I wanted to make did not belong in an open office. And then I put my phone down and went back to my task list, because this was not a fantasy, it was a sequence. The closing date fell into place almost by itself, and I am not pretending fate was involved. I am saying calendars are calendars and venues are booked on weekends, which is why the final appointment lined up with Emily's big ballroom day. And when I realized that the same afternoon they would be running around with garment bags and vendor calls, I would be initialing pages and holding keys, I felt a slow, steady satisfaction that was not about stealing thunder, it was about refusing to sit in the dark corner I had been assigned while the stage lights burned elsewhere, and I decided I would not lie about where I was going if asked, but I also would not broadcast it like a stunt, because the most effective correction is the one that lands without begging for applause. 2 days before the event, the group chat pinged me for a last-minute favor with place cards, and I typed the most honest message I had sent to that crowd in years, which was that I would not be attending the party and would not be available for setup because I had an appointment I could not move, and I hoped the day went smoothly, and I meant that last part because I do not want anyone's life to fall apart. I just want mine to stop being a storage closet for other people's needs, and when a cousin replied with a string of, "Wait, what?" I put my phone down and returned to my closing checklist, because for once I was the only person who needed me to finish on time. Here is the small, clean act that felt like revenge even though it looked like nothing from the outside. I logged into the shared planning spreadsheet, removed my name from every open task, reassigned each one to the most enthusiastic volunteer who had been posting ideas all month, wrote a short note at the top that said I was stepping back due to a prior commitment, and then I turned off notifications for the entire thread. Which sounds petty until you realize it was the only way to stop them from assuming I would carry the last mile, and as I hit mute I felt the click of a lock I should have turned years ago, because the machine jolted and they had to actually cover their own mess for once. Tomorrow morning, while they juggle timelines and call the DJ, I will sit at a table and sign my name on a stack of papers that finally put my life in my own hands, and the only thing they will see is silence, which was always the part they gave me. Except this time the silence is not me being erased, it is me choosing not to explain, and when the photo goes up later with a caption that says only finally home, the shock will travel faster than any invite I ever mailed, and if you think that timing is petty, you should know I built it on purpose, because I am done letting them script my role, and I am very interested to see who I am to them when I stop auditioning. The week unspooled in that strange mix of ordinary and pivotal, where I still showed up to work and answered emails and kept my head down, yet underneath all of it there was this hum I could not turn off, because the bank needed one more document. The insurance rep wanted a quick call to confirm coverage, and the closing coordinator walked me through what would happen at the table so there were no surprises, which was both reassuring and surreal, because for years I could not get this family to put a candle on a cupcake without turning it into a debate. And now here I was handling a purchase that actually changes the direction of my life with a handful of calm strangers who did not care about childhood roles, or who usually gets the last slice of attention. Emily's chat exploded with pictures of the balloon arch and taste test boxes and last-minute seating swaps that always come when certain cousins jockey for better placement. And I watched the messages stack up without opening them because I had learned that you do not need to absorb every flicker of other people's energy to be a decent person. And while they were tweaking a color scheme, I was setting up utilities, reviewing disclosures, and confirming the exact amount for the wire, which is the kind of number that makes your breath go shallow until you remember why you did all this. And I reminded myself out loud that I was not performing a rebellion, but building a life. And building a life sometimes looks like a very large spreadsheet quietly marching toward a date on a calendar. My mother called midweek with that bright tone she uses when she is trying to keep me in the fold, and she asked if I was excited for the weekend, which would have been lovely if she meant me. And when I said I had a prior commitment, she said she hoped it was not anything that could not be moved because family only gets so many big moments, and I very calmly told her my commitment could not be moved, that I hoped the party was wonderful, and that I was certain everyone would feel special with, or without my place cards, and she gave me a long silence that sounded like a test before she said that it would be nice if I could at least stop by, and I said I would let her know if timing allowed, and we both understood that meant no. There was a flicker of doubt that afternoon, and I will not pretend otherwise, because when you are about to cross a threshold you have been told your whole life is not for you. The old scripts try to stage a comeback and whisper that you are making a scene even if you have not said a word, and I sat with that feeling for a while, and then I did what helps me most, which is to look at facts, and the facts said I qualified, I planned, I saved. I was not taking food out of anyone's mouth, and the only person who had power to call this selfish was the same crowd that could not remember my existence unless my hands were holding their to-do lists. So I closed my eyes, let the doubt pass, and went back to the list that would put a key in my hand. The day before the event, I took a late lunch and met the agent for the final walkthrough, and there is nothing glamorous about flipping switches and checking water pressure and photographing serial numbers for the file, yet I felt this deep steadiness settle in. Because this was not a daydream or a petty scheme, it was the result of 100 small choices I had made while everyone assumed my silence meant surrender, and when the agent asked whether I had any questions, I said only that I understood where to be and when to sign, and I thanked her for being straight with me every step of the way, because after years of navigating family conversations where the agenda never matched the words, simple clarity felt like a luxury I had finally decided to buy. On the way back, I parked for a minute and thought about how to handle the reveal, and I kept circling the same thought, which is that I did not want to turn my life into a spectacle, yet I also did not want to hide in a way that fed the old dynamic. Because secrecy, in our house, was always used to keep me small while other people were magnified, so I opened my phone, took one photo of a view that means something to me but will never mean anything to them beyond what it symbolizes, typed a caption that said only that after years of doing the dutiful thing I was finally doing something for myself, and I set it to schedule for the exact hour I knew they would be bringing out a very expensive cake with a very expensive sparkler, not to be cruel, but to stop pretending that my life has to wait outside the ballroom until everyone is done clapping for the same person again. A cousin texted asking if I could please jump on a quick call about the slideshow because the file wouldn't export, and I stared at the screen and felt that old tug that has trapped me for decades. Then I typed the sentence I needed to hear when I was younger, which said that I was unavailable and that I believed in her ability to figure it out, and I put the phone down and sent my wire, and in that moment the revenge I wanted most landed, because the lesson was not about one post or one party. It was about refusing to be the fallback adult who makes other people's big moments effortless, while mine get postponed until the calendar forgets me again. By evening the emails were all answered and the funds were confirmed, and my bag was packed with a pen and an ID and a folder of documents I had prepared like a nerd because preparation lets me breathe, and I slept like someone who had made a choice instead of a point. And when my alarm went off the next morning, I looked at the screen, saw the tiny calendar dot sitting on the date no one else had marked for me, and I smiled to myself at how quiet it all still was, and then my phone buzzed with a message I did not expect, because Emily had written me directly, asking where I was and whether I could stop by before the party because she wanted to talk, and I stared at her message, felt the ground tilt just enough to make the next step matter. And I decided I would answer her after I finished signing for a place with a door that finally belongs to me. I woke up early, not because I wanted to make a scene or choreograph some grand entrance into a life they never imagined for me, but because banks open when they open and closings happen on a schedule that ignores family drama, and I made coffee. Checked the wire confirmation one more time like a person who has been taught by experience to verify everything twice, and then I drove to the office with a steady calm that felt almost suspicious after the noise of the last few weeks, because once there was no debate, no guilt, no last-minute reshuffling of my time to hold up somebody else's celebration. Just me, a folder of documents, and the very ordinary swirl of pens, stamps, and initials that somehow adds up to the biggest adult yes I have ever given myself. The signing itself was almost boring in the best possible way, a parade of pages and quick explanations and polite jokes from the coordinator about hand cramps. And when the last sheet slid into the pile and she congratulated me with that practiced little smile, I realized that the relief I felt was not cinematic or loud. It was a quiet unclenching of a grip I did not know I kept on my own life. And I sat there for a second and thought about how many times I had stood at the edges of themed parties and family toasts and clapped for other people while waiting for someone to notice that I also had a pulse, and how different it felt to be the only witness that mattered to a decision I would live in every day. Keys in hand, I drove over to the place because there are certain moments you do not postpone even if you are a practical person who hates unnecessary drama, and I unlocked the door. Walked through each room at a normal pace, because I refused to turn this into a montage in my own mind, and I opened the basics I had brought in my trunk, a few bags and a box with the kinds of things that make a place feel like it belongs to you. And then I sat on the floor, ate a simple lunch, and thought about whether to tell anyone right now or let it sit for a day and watch how the silence lands. And that was when my phone began to light up in the way it does on big family days. The group chat firing in bursts about ride shares and hair appointments and the usual last-minute delays, and for a minute I went back to that old tug of being useful versus being loyal to myself, and then I remembered what it cost me every time I chose useful. I took one picture, not a tour, not a brag, just a square that shows enough to be clear without inviting a debate about details, and I typed a caption that said only that after years of showing up for everyone else I finally showed up for myself, and it feels like home. And I posted it at the exact second I knew the ballroom doors would open, because I am done pretending that the calendar is a sacred object only when it belongs to them, and I put the phone face down and kept unpacking, not because I wanted to play mysterious, but because I wanted to experience my own life without narrating it to people who would instantly try to recenter the plot. The device buzzed like a living thing on the counter, messages stacking so fast the preview banners could not keep up, and curiosity won over discipline for a moment, so I turned it over and saw the first wave of reactions. And they were exactly what you would predict if you have ever been the understudy in your own family. A few friends screaming with happiness in the most loving way. 2 cousins posting those public congratulations that double as a little announcement that they were in the know even though they were not, and then the family comments that start off reasonable and turn sharp. My mother asking whether I had thought this through and whether I would be able to handle the expenses. My father writing something about timing that was framed as concern but read like an accusation, and a couple of aunts adding that they wished I had let the weekend be about Emily because big milestones only happen once, which is hilarious considering how many times we have celebrated the same person with the same enthusiasm like the rest of us are rotating extras. I did not reply. Not because I was afraid of a fight, but because the entire point of this year is that I do not explain every boundary like I am campaigning for office, so I liked the comments from people who had loved me without conditions. I ignored the ones that used the word selfish like a cudgel, and I texted my agent a thank you for making everything smooth, because I wanted to mark the day with appreciation that actually fits the effort it took, not with another round of emotional housekeeping for relatives who cannot stand it when the spotlight moves without their permission. An hour later my sister called, and I let it go to voicemail, which used to make me feel like a terrible person but in this moment felt like basic self-care, and her message was a breathless mix of congratulations and a request. Because she wanted to know if I could swing by the venue before guests arrived to help with a sound issue that had popped up, and there it was, the pattern trying to reassert itself even inside the congratulations, and I stood there with the phone in my hand and Realized that I could answer this one of two ways. I could fold and drive across town and fix a problem that I had not created in the name of being a good sister. Or I could honor the day I created by staying where I was and letting the professionals she hired handle their own job. And I pressed the side button, silenced the phone, and went back to arranging the first shelf of my own kitchen because somebody in this family needed to let a woman have one uninterrupted milestone. The comments kept coming, and they turned from concern to critical, relatives positioning themselves as guardians of propriety who were devastated by the idea that I might be overshadowing the main event. And a couple of them slid into my messages with the kind of faux advice that is just control with a friendly tone, suggesting I pull the post until after the party to show respect, and that was the moment I understood how deep the reflex runs. Because they were not asking for kindness, they were asking for invisibility, and I was not going to hand it to them like a gift. By evening, I had done exactly what I wanted to do on the first day of a new chapter, which was very little other than be present, and I took one last look at the screen before I put it away for the night. And that was when I saw a different kind of notification, not a comment or a like, but a screenshot from a friend with a simple question. Did you know your family group chat is leaking? And my stomach did that slow turn that means tomorrow is going to be loud. Because there is nothing more revealing than what people say when they assume you will never read it, and I closed my eyes, exhaled, and decided I would sleep well anyway, since the storm was going to break no matter what I did, and for the first time in years I felt ready to let it. I woke to a stack of screenshots that looked like a case file, not because I had been snooping, but because a cousin who has watched this circus from the cheap seats for years decided I deserved to know what was being said in the family chat. And before I opened anything, I sat there with my coffee and made a deal with myself that I would not let their volume set my pulse. Then I scrolled through message after message where my name was tossed around like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be spoken to, and it was all there in plain language with the punctuation of people who think they are the heroes. Complaints about how I had stolen focus, judgments about my timing, speculation about whether I could afford a place like that without help, and the part that caught in my throat even though I knew better was the line from my mother wondering aloud if I had done it to punish them, followed by an aunt suggesting that I take the post down until after the party to show respect, while two relatives I once trusted advised that if I wanted support I should have played along and announced it next week, and I realized that after a lifetime of reading between lines, I was finally being handed the translation in their own words. I put the phone face down and let the room be quiet for a minute, then picked it up again and found the few messages that mattered, the friends who were gleeful for me without caveats, the coworker who said she cried at her desk because she knew what it meant, the neighbor who offered her toolbox, and the cousin who had sent the screenshots adding, in one clean sentence, that if I wanted to reply, she would back me, and if I did not, she would back me harder, and that snapped me into my decision, because here is the thing I learned this year. Revenge that lasts is not loud, it is a boundary you hold when the begging starts. So I wrote exactly one message to exactly one place, the family chat that was so brave when they thought I would never read it, and I kept it simple and unflinching because sprawling explanations are how I have been trapped before. I said that I had seen the comments, that I did not owe anyone a pause on my life to keep someone else comfortable, that no one needed to worry about my finances because I had handled every cent myself for years while also covering more than my share of tasks they did not notice, and that I would not be attending any post-party debrief or mediation. Then I added the part that changed the air in the room even through a screen, which was that starting now I would no longer be available as unpaid staff for events, that any requests should go to the person in charge, and that birthdays, including mine, would be handled by the people who care, and before anyone could spin it into a debate I ended with a line that said I wished them a great evening and I looked forward to seeing how they celebrate Emily without making me the villain. Then I did something that sounds small and felt enormous. I created a new group with the 3 relatives who have consistently shown up for me without keeping score, my 2 closest friends, and my neighbor who keeps a spare key for emergencies. I named it with the kind of dry humor that keeps me from turning bitter, something like, actual family, and I shared the photo of my keys with a housewarming invite that offered 2 open weekends and a note that there would be no pressure and no speeches, just a couch, takeout, and a door that closes when we are tired, which is another way of saying I built the room I never got while growing up, and then I filled it with people who do not require entertainment to be kind. The public noise swelled the way public noise does. A few relatives posting subtweets that were not subtle, a passive-aggressive story from my mother about Grace. That would be hilarious if it were not so predictable, and one aunt who wrote a paragraph about tradition and respect that somehow included a photo from the ballroom as if to prove I had ruined a day that looked perfectly fine without me, and I ignored all of it because I have finally accepted that arguing with people who love the role they cast for you is a hobby, not a path, and I have better things to do than audition for a part one have already resigned. Emily called again that afternoon, and this time I answered, because for all my anger I wanted to hear her voice without the choir. And she surprised me by skipping the usual script and going straight to a shaky apology that sounded more honest than anything I have heard from her in years. She said she had asked the DJ to lower the volume so she could step into the hallway. She said she was tired of being the occasion on repeat. She said she knew our birthdays were not the same story and that she had let it be too easy. Then she asked a question that caught me off guard, which was whether I was cutting her off along with the rest, and I told her I was cutting off the machine, not every person inside it, and that if she wanted a relationship with me it would have to be one where she does not forward me tasks or expect me to swallow bile and call it support, and she said she could do that. Then she asked if she could come see the place tomorrow morning before they left town. No entourage. No cameras, just her, and I told her she could, which does not earn her sainthood or me weakness. It just means I was not interested in punishing one person for a system we were both born into. The last move I made was not dramatic, but it was deliberate. I opened my settings and turned off tagging from family accounts. I removed myself from the old planning spreadsheet where my name had been a permanent fixture in the reliable column. And I set a reminder that on my next birthday I would be out of town, not to hide, but to close the loop on the experiment I started when I went quiet, which proved what I needed to know, that when I do not remind them to treat me like I matter, they do not, and that when I treat myself like I matter, the right people notice without being prompted. I wish I could say that after my message the comments stopped and the ants reflected and my parents called with a real apology, but that is a movie ending and my life does not need a soundtrack. What I can say is that the room inside my head is finally quiet, that the condo is mine, that the people who showed up are the ones I am building with, and that when I locked the door that night and leaned back against it, I felt the clean satisfaction of a plan that did not seek approval, did not demand applause, and did not hurt anyone who did not choose to swing first. And if there is a question floating at the edge of this, it is not whether I went too far, it is whether they will ever learn how far I had to go before I stopped asking nicely. Which is not my problem anymore, because I did not win a fight, I ended a script, and I am very comfortable letting the credits roll without their names at the top.